Son, and of the Holy Spirit. In the past couple of months, or few months, we have been following the church calendar from a sort of a strategic point of view, rather than from a detailed, technical type of way. Hopefully you've noticed that to some extent. And I hope that all of you do indeed have an Orthodox calendar and are regularly looking at it to see which feast days and which saints are being commemorated. Because now that we have come into this period after Pentecost, where the church is given and established, our obligation here is to more and more commemorate all the people that have made it into the kingdom of heaven, the saints that we have. In the calendar, you will find certain references to some of the people. For example, you might see St. Anthony the Hermit, or St. Sergius the Cenobite, or St. Herman and Seraphim the Skeet Dwellers. What does all that mean? What does all that mean? Hermit, Skeet, Cenobite. As I've been saying to you in the past weeks, when the church first came into being, it had to duck into the catacombs, duck underground, go into where bodies were buried, cemeteries essentially, which you can still see if you go on a pilgrimage, for example, to Rome and a few other places that haven't been destroyed. And there it stayed for over 300 years until St. Constantine the Great freed the church from that persecution and moved the capital of the main Orthodox Church to Constantinople, starting off the 1200-year glory of the Byzantine Empire, which preserved without any lie or any heresy the truth that was given by Christ. What happened when St. Constantine did that was both a two-edged short sword. From one point of view, it allowed the world to embellish the church externally, the external part of the church, with great glory, with the arts, the music, all the trappings that we have. They used to even throw gold dust when a patriarch would walk for the services. You know, it's a great and glorious thing. But from the other point of view, something else happened which wasn't so great and glorious to the external church. And that was that the world rushed in. What does that mean? Opinions, people who are only half-heartedly believing came, who did not want to necessarily accept the teaching that was given, but started to push around their own ideas about Christ and Christianity and dogma and all those sorts of things. And from that period arose a whole series of heresies which had to be condemned, explained and put to rest by the 7 ecumenical councils that we have as being the definitive ones that gave us the true understanding about Christ and his work and the way the church operates. However, at the same time there arose a great body of zealots who, having been in the catacombs, could not tolerate this rush of all these worldly people into the church. And they wanted to have that purity that they experienced before. So they fled. They fled and established catacombs of a different form. They went into deserts, into forests and other remote areas, the wilderness being the walls of the catacomb. And there they continued with the cycle of services free from all this interference of worldly ideas, because they wanted to acquire that which was given to them and which is given to us all, to struggle for Christ's likeness, to change our souls and make it ready for the kingdom of heaven, without all this nonsense about, I don't believe this, or I think this is that way or that way, instead of taking that which was given. What am I talking about? Talking about monasticism, of course. Back in Old Testament times, there were monastics, but it was not this sort of great movement. Like Prophet Isaiah, for example, Ezekiel, lived very monastic type lives, running out into the wilderness and there being alone with God, because that's what it means. Mono, one, oneness, being alone, monastic. And so we come to this description of certain saints. St. Anthony the Hermit. What's a hermit? Well, from the Orthodox monastic point of view, it's a person who by themselves flees into the wilderness, be it a desert area or a cold area like forests in Siberia and whatever, and there by themselves, far away from anybody else, sets the work of fixing up their soul. Prayers, all those sorts of things, fasting and various deeds. That, of course, takes a lot of effort. It's a dangerous path, particularly to young people. First of all, not only do you have to be able to cope with nature and your own requirements for life, but even more importantly, you have to know how to fight the interior warfare so that the demonic realm doesn't drive you crazy. And it can drive you crazy very quickly, even to the point of suicide, by being by yourself like that and not having any recourse or help to anybody else. But there are many saints of that nature who did succeed and became holy. And we call that form of monasticism hermetic monasticism, hermetic. The Lord often opens up any of this sanctity to others, and others come and seek these people out. Just maybe to talk, but sometimes to join them. And if 2 or 3 come and join, we have what we call the skit monasticism, where 2 or 3 live together, a stone's throw from each other in their own sort of little dwelling, and come together for prayers, for common meals, feast days, etc. This is considered to be the most easiest, if you like that word, the most safest way of monasticism, because there's always somebody there to help you if you get into trouble, not far away. You don't have to contend with the loneliness or with big crowds or anything like that. And usually the 2 or 3 that are living together are of like mind with each other. They've come there for the same reasons. And so it's a good form. They can work the land and whatever, to make sure that they have the needs for their body as well as for all those things of their soul. And again, when these blossom, others come looking for them and might join them. 12, 50, 100, even 1,000. Instead of having hermits, skit, all of a sudden we have a cenobitic monasticism. Cenobitic. It's not as hard as the hermetic one, but it's certainly harder than the skit one. And it's hard not so much because you're not looked after, but because you're continually buffeted by the crowds of other monks around you. You need great patience, great endurance, great forgiveness, because there is this thing of being pushed around to cut off your will and your pride. I remember when I was staying at a Cenobitic monastery in New York, and the first couple of days when they called for meals, and you come into this big hall where they serve the meals, and these benches, you sit on the benches, and you sit down, and you watch them all come in, and a couple come and sit next to you, and then more come, and suddenly they're sort of pushing you, off the bench till you fall off. It takes a while to realise that what's happening is you've taken somebody's place. In a nice way, they are sort of giving you the flick till somebody comes and rescues you or takes you to where the pilgrims might be eating, where that sort of doesn't happen. Unlike some of the other Christian confessions, we don't have orders. The Orthodox Church has never had orders. It's had these three forms: Hermetic, Skit Life, and Cenobitic. But you may have heard about these orders. There's Benedictines, Cistercians, Franciscans, all these sorts of things. We don't have those. The reason we don't is because it's not a natural thing. Like somebody gets the idea it's good to walk barefoot. I like walking in summer and winter with no shoes, barefoot. So I'll start an order barefoot. So if you want to join, you have to wear no shoes. You've got to go barefoot. You have this order of barefoot walkers. Or another one might want total poverty. You don't own a thing. So if you want to join, you've got to be in total poverty, to join this order. It's sort of unnatural, right? Being an artificial sort of imposition. Because in Orthodox, if you want to go barefoot, you can always do that in a skit monasticism. You don't have to make an order out of it and have all these rules and regulations on how you do all that sort of thing. So we don't have that. But we do have these three forms. And in fact, in all the nations that have had monks, monasticism, Orthodox ones, you will find the founders of those three types of monastic forms there. I mentioned St. Anthony, who first started as a hermit, but then he grew into a Cenobitic type of monastery with thousands of people coming to join him. And they even have this book called The Desert a City, because there were so many people to join him that the desert wilderness became a city with all these monastics living there. But in each of those countries you will find founders like that, those three forms of monasticism. Our founders here of the mission, Father Herman and Father Seraphim from Platina, are very much in that skit environment. Two brothers who went together for the purposes of prayer and fasting for the church services, but also to do the missionary work in English, to translate and print books. And together they achieved that. It had grown, and has grown to about a dozen, and it's been about a dozen for many, many years. Some coming, some going. But it's never turned into this big cenobium, with thousands of monks. If you go to a place like Mount Athos, particularly to the Russian monasteries, these St. Panteleimons, you'll see these buildings. Most of them are not used now, but these rooms there for hundreds of monastics. In other words, back in the past, that's how many were living there, together, struggling to fix up their souls. These things are important for us to know, for the simple reason that monks are the light of the world, as they say. Monks are the light of the world. It is mainly through monastic writings and teachings that we get the finer bits of our faith understood. Because these people take the time to examine all these sorts of things that go on with the human in the world and record it, and also describe ways of living so that it's God-pleasing. The services that we have are all monastic. There's no such thing as a lay service in the church. They're all monastics. You know, you have matins and vespers and compline and all that. They're all monastic services. Liturgy, yes, too, as well, but liturgy is a sacrament and it requires a priest, but the other ones do not require a priest. So you can do those services if, you know, there's major lockdowns or something like that and you can't get to church, you can do that yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have a priest like some people think, you know, to have vespers or something like that. Not at all. These are the cycle of services, the daily ones, weekly, monthly, yearly, which are the breathing of the church. Without that, the church will not breathe, and without breathing, you die. That's how important it is. Where those things are not done, indeed, there is a sort of a death. Like if there's a parish that's got the capability of doing those sorts of things and doesn't do it, it's not going anywhere, because that is a major part of our life as Christians, to have that cycle of services. As written even in the Gospels, in the New Testament, we have to pray without ceasing. And that cycle of services every 3 hours, day and night, is the formal part of that cycle. But if you can't do that, there's always the short prayers like the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, the sinner, over and over again. And I think I've told you how that developed back in the deserts by the monks. They're using stones to count. You know, you have to, because there's a cycle of services every 3 hours, so you have to pray for a certain time. If you don't have the book, so you say the Jesus prayer. Use little stones to count. Right? And eventually those stones were joined together through a rope or something, and then a rope itself was made with knots so that you can count how many prayers you have said. And the Jesus prayer is only one of many of these short prayers. It is Mother of God, save us. Or as we have the commemoration today on the new martyrs of Russia, the royal martyrs, holy martyrs, Tsar martyr and passion bearers, pray to God for us, a short prayer, similar to the Jesus prayer. To your patron saint, whoever it might be. Yes. Holy Father St. John, pray to God for me. My holy guardian angel, pray to God for me. All these are short prayers which you can use when you don't have texts or something like that. When you're at work, travelling, doing anything like that, always keep that in mind. Keep your heart and mind on those sorts of things. And therefore you're walking always before God, before Christ, before the saints. You're always walking before them. You're not forgetting what you are here for. Because don't forget, these people have already made it into the kingdom of heaven and are there to assist us, because that is pleasing to the Lord. It's pleasing for him to have the saints assist us in getting to where they have gone. I hope you understand this, because it is an important thing and it's a big phenomenon. Unfortunately, in our times, particularly in the West, monasticism has shrunk quite a bit. It is blooming in parts like Russia, but even on Mount Athos in Greece, it's been significantly shrunk. And it comes in periods. There are periods when it grows greatly and then shrinks again. And in the West, I have trouble finding a monastic establishment that is, well, hard to find many anyway, that you could say are following the way that it was always being given. There's always some sort of compromise today. the world rushes in, even to monastics. And so many of them can't live in the wilderness. They still live in cities. They build a monastery or something in a city and live there, and you've still got all that noise, one way or another, which interferes, and it does interfere. It really does interfere, compared to being miles and miles away from any of that sort of thing. That's all I wanted to say to you today. We also are commemorating the Tsar Martyr and his family, who were murdered by the Bolsheviks in 1917. And there are many miracles coming from that. He was the last emperor, Orthodox emperor, but the Holy Fathers say there will be another one before the end of time, which will put things right. And that's what we await for and pray to. And may God help us in that struggle to be aware that that which the world gives to us is very fake and deceptive. And we have to be able to dodge that in our lives so it doesn't affect us in the wrong way, without being afraid and without having any misgivings on that. Because whatever you dodge from the worldly point of view will give you the crowns in the heavenly realm, which is what we seek. Amen. Let us say with our whole soul, with our whole mind, let us say,